Hello, and welcome to the 2021 SDG Action Zone. Here to officially open our virtual doors wide to everyone everywhere is someone who needs no introduction, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
It is my great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to everybody joining the SDG Action Zone from around the world.
What's your message to world leaders?
That we must be humble and recognize how fragile the world is, how fragile our societies are. Look at COVID, that is moving around the world without the world being able to defeat it. Look at climate change, where we see catastrophic events more and more multiplying everywhere. And again, not yet enough political will to fight it effectively. And so we have a choice. Either we make a breakthrough, either we change things and get together to change things, or we have a breakdown and the world will move in the wrong direction and all of us will face terrible problems. Each one of us will face terrible problems.
What's your own feeling about the years ahead? Are you more pessimistic or optimistic?
When you have a situation like this, it doesn't matter if you are optimistic or pessimistic. You need to be determined to face the risks, determined to face the challenges and to change, and to do what is necessary to overcome our dramatic problems.
Do you have a message for young people?
First of all, young people, you were talking about pessimism and optimism. Young people are the reason for which I think optimism makes sense, because we see young people much more cosmopolitan. Much more able to understand that we are together, feeling that diversity is a richness, not a threat. I see young people betting in the future instead of just looking backwards and trying to repeat the past. So we need to give young people power. And so my message to young people is power needs to be taken by you. You need to do everything. Organize yourselves. Use your instruments, social media, the way you interact within society, with other people, with governments, with the institutions. Use your power to make those that are still essentially in charge to understand that they need to change, and they need to change to respect what young people need in not only the world of tomorrow, but already in the world of today.
How important is gender equality to get to that better world we envision, that just and equitable future?
The equality between men and women is a basic condition to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to have a better world. Half of the humanity needs to fully contribute to our global well-being. And today, still women are discriminated in many aspects. And this is essentially a question of power. We live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture. Women are 50% of the population, but they are only 20% of government cabinet members, 25% of parliamentarians, and very few in the boards of the big companies. This needs to change. We need to have parity. We need to have more and more women in position of power. And we need at the same time to correct legislations that still discriminate against women, unfortunately, in many countries around the world. We need to fight gender violence that is not only affecting women in situations of conflict, but at home. We need to be able to empower economically women, to make sure that women entrepreneurs have the same chances that men entrepreneurs in credit and in other different aspects of their activity. We must, if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, if we want to have a better world, we must have women and men in full equality.
What can we individually do to fight climate change?
I think it's extremely important for two reasons. First, because we must press governments to act. Governments are not doing enough. We see today the civil society, the business community, in many aspects doing more than governments. So we need to pressure governments. At the same time, we need to do our own contribution. We all have a footprint in relation to climate in this world, and we need to be able to progressively adapt ourselves to the needs of a green economy and a green society. But it is very important to create the conditions and the stimuli that are essential for that to happen. For instance, taxes. We need to shift taxes. Taxing carbon, which means taxing polluters, and with the money that we get from taxing the polluters, we can reduce the taxes on people, namely on labor. So, I mean, this will, of course, make things that contribute to climate change more expensive, but it will improve the income of people, especially those with lower incomes. At the same time, we still have huge subsidies to fossil fuels. If we change the subsidies to if we reduce the subsidies to fossil fuels and use that money to support people with lower incomes, for instance, then we have a double victory. We reduce pollution, but we improve the living conditions of people. Because it's essential to understand that people will act also based on the conditions created by governments for people to act. And we need to put pressure on governments to do the right thing in the economy, to allow us also individuals to do the right thing in our own lives.
What can we do to change food systems to ensure access to a healthy diet for everyone?
First of all, hunger is something completely unacceptable in modern societies. Because let's be clear, it's not because of lack of food that people are angry in the world. There is enough food in the world to feed the world's population. The problem is a problem of inequality. It's a problem of poverty. It's the fact that many people have not the resources to be able to have an adequate diet. So, first thing, and very important thing, namely when we are doing a recovery that needs to be inclusive, is to fight inequality and to address the needs of the people that today have no capacity to acquire what is needed for a normal diet. So there is something essential in fighting inequality in general. But then we need to make sure that we support rural communities. Poverty is largely in rural communities. And to support them to modernize their own capacity, to support them to make them more productive, but productive of food that is wealthy, that is healthy. At the same time, it's very important to respect biodiversity. And for instance, indigenous communities, they have shown how it is possible to live in a world keeping biodiversity and at the same time being with a nature-based solution for the problems that we have. So supporting indigenous communities, supporting nature-based solutions is another way. And then it's very strange because we have hunger. Last year, more 20% became hungry than the year before. So we see that this is a problem that is aggravating at the present moment. At the same time, we have obesity. So it's important also to do everything in the policies that are adopted, both in the restructuring of the primary sector and in the policies related to taxation, to do everything possible in order to make sure that people have access to a healthy diet.
What needs to be done to achieve the SDGs by 2030?
Well, we are not on track. We were not on track before the COVID. And obviously with the COVID, we have seen the global economy decelerating, even reducing. We are now starting a recovery, but a very uneven recovery. So the first thing we need to do, now that trillions of dollars are being spent to recover, is to make sure that all that money, first of all, is distributed more evenly, because rich countries are having the chance to do much more than poor countries, which is unacceptable from the justice point of view, but also that that money is used in an inclusive and sustainable way. What does it mean, inclusive? Fighting inequality, addressing the inequalities among countries and within societies, the inequalities among people. And at the same time, sustainable, which means investing in the future, in the green economy, not in the past, in the brown economy, making a transition that is necessary to guarantee that not only everybody benefits, inclusive recovery, but that recovery is sustainable, which means a green recovery. And this is absolutely essential, mobilizing in this way for us to be able to catch up and to make sure that the Sustainable Development Goals will be met in 2030.
Thank you, Secretary General. There's so much work to do, but we're grateful to be doing it with you. Well, we're off to a thoughtful start already. Whether you're a development veteran who knows all 17 Sustainable Development Goals by heart, or a newcomer who just wants to find your own role in this transformative people's agenda, this is the place for you. I'm Nadira Hira. I'm honored to be your MC for this year's SDG Action Zone. And before I say anything else, I want to welcome another special guest to the virtual stage. because what she's about to share with you is just about the best framing for these next 3 days that I can imagine. Please welcome world champion poet Emi Mahmood.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share some remarks with you, a poem, and first, a reminder. This is the preamble. This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace and larger freedom. We recognize that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure our planet. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets which we are announcing today demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. They seek to build on the Millennium Development Goals and complete what these did not achieve. They seek to realize the human rights of all and to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. They are integrated and indivisible and balance the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, social, and environmental. The goals and targets will stimulate action over the next 15 years in areas of critical importance for humanity and the planet. People, we are determined to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. Planet, we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. Prosperity, we are determined to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, and that economic, social, and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. Peace, we are determined to foster peaceful, just, and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. There can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. Partnership, we are determined to mobilize the means required to implement this agenda through a revitalized global partnership for sustainable development, based on a spirit of strengthened global solidarity, focused in particular on the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable, and with the participation of all countries, all stakeholders, and all people. The interlinkages and integrated nature of the Sustainable Development Goals are of crucial importance in ensuring that the purpose of the new agenda is realized. If we realize our ambitions across the full extent of the agenda, the lives of all will be profoundly improved, and our world will be transformed for the better. The most vulnerable people. Solidarity, determination, dignity, health, peace. All of the language is there. All of the framework, the groundwork, the legislation, it's all there. But what isn't there is the precedent for implementing change, for holding our leaders responsible for inclusion, for including everyone that these goals attempt to cover. The precedent isn't there, and that's where we all come in. I think we live in a world where the people who create the circumstances and who make the decisions are seldom those who have to live with the consequences. How do we change that? We change that by making sure that the most vulnerable people are not only at the center, but at the forefront of everything that we do. We have to let the most vulnerable people lead the charge for change. And the means and the support and the resources that we pour into change should be poured into the most vulnerable people. And they should be trusted with leading the charge for change. This poem is called Beyond the Screen, or Blue for Sudan, and it's about where I'm from. My plane lands in Al-Fashir, and I instantly fall 20 years backwards in time. Dirt roads and nameless streets, my earliest memories almost perfectly preserved. My younger cousin tells me to smile. The dog filter over our hijabs makes this easier to do. I tell her how magical it is to feel like we've grown up together, even though I've only known her for 2 years. The phone between us changes what it means to be family, as we parse through the wreckage of what was and try to write anew, to see the world through one another's eyes. A few weeks later, the revolution begins, and the same VPN I downloaded to get filters in the Sahara with my cousin is the only thing connecting me to the world outside. They say our lives will never be the same because of technology. I say technology will never be the same because of us. I'm drawing water from a reservoir to help my great aunt with laundry one day. I'm documenting network interruptions across the city the next. You can't know how crucial a viable network is until you've spent a generation in isolation. You can't know how powerful an electric grid is until you've marched on a moonless night. You can't know how important a water pump is until you've shut down an entire hospital to dig a well. You can't take an entire country offline and have no one notice. In an attempt to crush the popular uprising, the military issues a media blackout, shutting down the internet nationwide. Days offline turn into months, and still Blue for Sudan trends worldwide, and still the revolution is not only televised but also broadcast, posted, shared, reshared, transmitted. We distribute codes and tips for how to get around network blocks, how to find shelter, how to successfully carry out a non-violent revolution, how to crowdfund freedom. There is no behind the screen anymore. You can no longer create something without thinking about the people who use it. A country stuck 20 years backward in time can be catapulted forward at the speed of light, or at least the speed of ideas. In a time more rife with questions than answers, every one of us becomes an answer. As we amplify our voices, rectify the record, shape the world one contribution at a time, one machine, one woman, one job, one protest, one meme, one headline at a time. My hands shake as I type, as I sit, as I travel, as we lurch forward one advancement at a time. Each piece bringing every one of us closer to our own self-actualization. I think the world becomes itself each time one of us finds fulfillment. I think the world becomes itself each time one of us finds ourselves. I found myself on a screen for the first time in the year 2006 when I saw my great-grandparents' house on the computer, thousands of miles away, as we took a break from the constant pain of genocide to memorize the shape of our city just in case it didn't last another day. I never imagined that 12 years later the dictator would fall. That 12 years later our voices would be heard. That 12 years later people would look at high altitude balloons and think we could use that environmentalists would plant trees with drones, that mothers and daughters would break age-old stereotypes with the touch of an app. I never imagined that 12 years later, I'd be standing in that same house next to that same young woman who shares my face, my family tree, and a million pictures between when we meet and when we see each other next. Our hearts full as we prepare to move forward, armed with nothing but our phones, our smiles, and the sheer conviction to shape our world a little better this time around. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I get goosebumps every time I hear that preamble. It's hard not to feel like we're in the midst of a perfect storm, with deep injustice, inequality, conflict, a global pandemic, and a climate crisis closing in on all sides. One minute we're watching wildfires, droughts, floods, and locusts ravaging our world on television. The next minute, our social media channels are full of posts about the fall of democracy, rising COVID deaths, and rollbacks of our rights. In the words of the UN Secretary General, multilateralism is failing its most basic test. And the SG is right. It can feel beyond overwhelming, like there's far too much to do and not nearly enough will to do it. But as the SG also said, we're at a breakdown or breakthrough moment. So let's break through. Because throughout history, it's been in these hardest of times that we make our biggest changes and take our greatest leaps forward. As we speak, there are high-level meetings and convenings happening as part of this year's UN General Assembly, focused on COVID vaccines, racial discrimination, jobs and social protection, climate action, food systems, among many others. The goal? Concrete investment plans, policies, and action to see this work through. In confronting the harshest realities, we have a chance to shape a new future, to make the tough, bold decisions that will give every creature on this planet the world we need. That is the opportunity of this moment, and we have to embrace it. We have to recover better for people and the planet. Lucky for us, the SDGs, our global goals, are the vision for a transformed, green, and equitable world, the world's to-do list. And that's what the SDG Action Zone is all about. Moving from rhetoric to reality, from grandiose commitments to inclusive, scalable solutions and true accountability. So I want to bring in one of the people who made this year's SDG Action Zone possible to share a little more about the ambitions of our program, which are high. Please welcome the global head of the SDG Strategy Hub, Dauda Jabarte. Dauda, it's so great to have you.
Hi.
People have been stressing urgency for decades. Why is this moment different?
There's just so much going on. Between COVID-19, climate catastrophes, multiple crises, we're just at a moment where there's so much to lose. There's credibility on the line, there's lives and livelihoods at risk, and the decisions that get made now and today and here are going to be what transform our future. And we need a new social contract where people and planet are at the very, very center and heart of everything that gets done and decided upon.
But playing devil's advocate, how do these conversations move things forward?
We're not claiming to raise billions of dollars for climate change or sustainable development financing. That's being done in other places. What we're doing, what we think is rare and needed, is creating the space for radical transparency. We're peeling away the platitudes. We're showcasing behind-the-scene conversations between top leaders who are in a position to change the trajectory that we're on at the moment. And we can't forget that businesses, governments, societies are all made up of humans who, at the end of the day, want to survive, want to thrive, want to be able to provide for their loved ones and their families. And yes, governments have an oversized responsibility here, but we all need to do our part, however big or however small possible.
Can you give viewers a quick taste of what's to come?
Absolutely. We've reimagined what's possible. We've changed the way we've done things, both in terms of the curation and drawing upon shared intelligence to source the speakers and the expertise that's been showcased here. And given that we are at a point where things need to be radically different and changed and improved, we've reflected that in what we've done this year with the SDG Action Zone. The speakers are amazingly diverse, both in terms of geography, demographics, sector, and depths of experience. Everyone really, really knows their stuff. The people that are showcased are people that are out there leading by doing and with their actions rather than their words and their rhetoric. And we just couldn't be prouder of not only what we've managed to pull off, but provide the platform for everyone to come together and as the community is being built.
All to say, we're about to roll up our sleeves. Thanks, Dauda, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
There's so much ahead in the SDG Action Zone, and you won't want to miss a second of it. Today, we'll be focused on poverty and inequalities, because everyday acts of injustice, power imbalances, and weak governance systems make dignified lives and livelihoods an impossibility for too many people. For all of us to reach our full potential, we need to address the massive barrier of inequity around the world, putting people first and at the center. That's what we'll be unpacking today, with an amazing roster of brilliant speakers. But before we get started, we have to do just a little bit of housekeeping, of course. First, each day of this year's SDG Action Zone, we're turning the microphone over to you. On the virtual platform, you'll have a chance to submit your questions directly to our speakers, who will come back at the end of the day during a very special new session we're calling Ask Away. So, ask away. We know you'll have smart, probing, respectful questions, and we cannot wait to hear them. We'll also be asking you some questions throughout the day as well, so keep an eye out for those live polls on our virtual platform. And if you're looking for an overview of the entire program, you can find and download our event schedule on the virtual platform. Keep watching the on-demand section of the website too, where all our sessions will be posted. You'll be able to catch up on anything you missed or share your favorite conversations with anyone and everyone from there, as well as on the individual session pages. Finally, please don't forget to follow and join the conversation on Twitter and everywhere you social with hashtag SDG Action Zone 2021 and hashtag For People for Planet. Let's use the momentum of these 3 action-inspiring days to widen our circle and bring new communities, colleagues, partners, friends, and allies into this SDG Action Zone. So, shall we get started?